to the Backroads Bill Podcast. I'm Ben, and last week on the show, we talked about Can Emerge, which is a free mental health resource that is available to Canadians that you go on the website and it will help guide you to whatever resources that you need for whatever you're dealing with. And we talked a lot about trauma, specifically PTSD, and we had Margaret McKinnon on. It was a great conversation just around PTSD and around Can Emerge and everything that she's done in her career when it comes to PTSD research and that stuff academically. So today we are talking about PTSD again, but this time it hits a little bit closer to home because we brought in a guest who was actually part of the Downburst last summer. Her and her family were in the park and had to deal with this, and she talks about how she had to go through some very traumatic things, people getting pinned under trees, having to try to get out, the amount of time she was that they were basically stranded in this one area in the park when they just they went there just expecting to have a nice weekend, a nice trip, and a camping trip, and it turns into a very, very traumatic experience. And her being a trained psychologist here locally gave some really interesting insight into trauma, into the event, and also how you can kind of keep yourself from developing PTSD when you're in a traumatic event. And so it was a really interesting conversation that kind of builds off what we talked about last week, but it hits a little bit closer to home this week for where we are in Northern Ontario and where we are in North Bay. But it was a really cool conversation, and I hope you learn a little bit as this is coming up. So first, we do need to thank today's lead sponsor of this podcast, though, and that is Source for Sports. It's almost that time of year. Early mornings at the rink, fresh notebooks and backpacks, and a community gearing up for another great season of varsity sports. At Source for Sports North Bay, we're proud to be part of it all. Whether it's finding your kid's first pair of skates, gearing up for tryouts, or outfitting your team for the season ahead, we've got you covered. Because here, we're not just a sports store, we're neighbors, coaches, teammates, and fans. And we're proud to cheer you on every shift, step, and stride of the way. Visit Source for Sports North Bay at 1321 Fisher Street and let us help you along your way. All right, this week on the podcast, we are pleased to have in somebody we haven't had on this show before, but is not a stranger to the Echo Network, Brigitte Lebel, who was in on March 10th, the episode with Lisa on To North Bay with Love. I highly recommend checking it out because we really dive into her story and what she went through, and she also went on this retreat that just happened back in May. So first of all, welcome into the podcast, and maybe tell us a little bit about the retreat that happened back in May.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. So it was a grief retreat that took place in Algonquin Park in May of this year, and it went better than I could possibly have imagined. We had a great group, and some serious kind of magic happened amongst the participants and within the group, and it went so well that we decided I've gone ahead and booked it for May of 2027, so we can do it all over again. And I think it'll be an annual thing at maybe even twice a year eventually. But for now, I'll do annually because it was so well received, and I think people really appreciated finding community of people who can make space for and sit through with the conversations that we don't make room for in everyday life around death.
Yeah, and just for
loss.
the context about the grief, and another reason you should go back and listen to that previous episode we did was because that's a big part of your story. I don't want to get too much into it here. I know Bill has a bunch of questions, but I highly recommend for our viewers to go out and check out that episode because that's kind of what we're referencing here. So
Yeah, I maybe just mention it briefly. Part of what inspired me to do these grief retreats was that I lost my daughter, Camilla, in 2021. And it was a sudden blindsiding event, as the other thing we're going to talk about today. But it was sort of like what I searched for a lot was grief retreat. I kept looking it up, and I couldn't find anything. So that was sort of like something I told myself was when I felt well enough, I would start doing it. And so 5 years later, I did my first one, and it was great.
Congratulations.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue for me to talk about the June 21st, 2025 storm at Samuel D. Champlain Provincial Park and the Canadian Ecology, which kind of devastated the landscape, so to speak. And also the word, we're all suffering grief. I was in the storm. A tree came through the cabin. And, in stories I've done with you and with others, I've written about 7 or 8 stories on the storm now. But for context, I tell people that it took about 6 months for me with my therapist to finally admit that I was afraid of losing my vocation, my avocation, all the memories of family, going back 37 years in the park. And it was a real breakthrough. I never denied the storm. I was never angry about the storm, but still, you were in the storm. But tell us about your journey in the storm, because it was a harrowing experience.
Oh my goodness. It was, definitely unexpected. The irony is that I was going that weekend for some peace and some calm because things had been stressful in life. And June is my grief month, just since we've already mentioned Camilla, because she died in June. So it's a really hard month. So I went that weekend to Mattawa to sort of get the healing from the trees and the river. And what ended up unfolding is not at all what we expected. I don't know if you want me to get right into it.
Yeah, well, you want to talk about your partner Vic and being pinned, and there was a bit of I think one of Camilla's friends was there, and it was a bit of a commemoration, but and there's the guitar, but tell us about what happened.
Camilla's friend joined us on Friday night, and lucky for her, she didn't end up coming on Saturday. But everything was very, very peaceful, and then I remember hearing, we knew that there was a storm watch. But normally, when you hear about this and you're a camper, you just, in the past anyways, not anymore, but I would just sort of brush it off. It may not even hit us. If it does, it's just, we'll go in the trailer, we'll play cards, that kind of thing. So when we heard the thunder that night, it was around 9:20 or something, 9:10. And it was quite far away. So we're like, you know what, let's start putting things away and we'll go in the trailer. And I feel in my mind, it was 4 minutes later. It was that fast. So even having the thought of ooh, it sounds really bad, maybe we should go. There was not even any lead up like that. I just heard 2 loud hail. And then our friend that was with us had a tent. We saw it go into the fire. And then we quickly removed it. And then 30 seconds later, the 2 giant red pine trees broke and bent and crushed the trailer that we were all in. A tent trailer, a small tent trailer. There was 5 of us. And I didn't even know what was happening. It was just that crazy. And I did get injured. But the scariest part for me at the beginning was, getting out, sneaking my way out of a very small hole and seeing that everything looked different. Nothing looked the same. I didn't even know where I was. And the trailer, pop-up trailers, when they're down in the driving mode, that's what my trailer looked like. And I couldn't hear my kids. I couldn't hear anybody. I think the only person that I heard was Vic at first, who said, "I'm pinned." And I remember acknowledging her and saying, "Okay, yeah, I hear you. Let me just," in my own mind going, "I have to go check on the kids." And I remember just jumping from corner to corner, looking to find an opening, and literally just thinking, "Oh my God! All my kids die. This is insane. I can't believe this is how the story goes." And then suddenly, just kind of seeing my daughter standing in the trailer. So the way that the roof kind of cracked open, my daughter's the one that was the least injured. She was just standing in the air, And my son was also pinned underneath something, and my daughter was the one who rescued him, using the strength of her legs to lift up whatever was on top of him. And then, the other person, I think he had a bit of injuries as well, but it was Vic that was really, really in a pickle because, I don't know how much those trees weigh. I think the tens of thousands of pounds, but it was her arm was just stuck right underneath that, between with the roof in between. So, I remember at first thinking we could try to pull it off and we can just try to get her out of there. But it very quickly became clear that we were very screwed. So we just kind of kept calling 911 over and over and over and over again. And just trying to get them to come. And they kept saying, "We're here. We just can't get to you." There's so many trees. We're just trying to bulldoze them and move them out of the way. And I remember the irony is that what I was saying earlier that day about what I love about Samuel de Champlain is that unlike other provincial parks, it's a 7-kilometer drive from the main highway versus, many of the other ones like Arrowhead or just many other Northern Ontario parks. It's you're right on the highway. So that became the big obstacle because they couldn't get to us because all the trees that were down. And I just remember thinking, they're saying that they're here, but I can't hear chainsaws, for hours, right? And so it was about 3 hours after the event and Vic being pinned that the first rescuers came on foot because they couldn't come by any other way. And there was 3 guys, and one of them we called Chainsaw Guy because they didn't seem to know each other. And the main firefighter was just like, Chainsaw Guy, I need you over here, and this and that. And anyways, we were asked to get out of the car at that point because they were worried about the tree bouncing back. And so we were literally outside in the rain for like hours. It's just such a weird reality, and you're just in a different headspace when you're in that kind of trauma.
Were you calm? Were you calm?
Calm. I look back on it and I can't believe how calm I was.
Were you in shock?
I was in shock. We were all calm. Like my son, who was 8, like I didn't even hear him whimper. But like it took, I think, 2 or 3, maybe even 4 hours for me to realize I had a bump on my head. My son had a bump on his head. Like all of a sudden I couldn't lift my arm anymore. Like it took so long for the pain to register, which was also kind of interesting to kind of experience with adrenaline. But yeah, just so calm. And then finally, when they were able to kind of get the tree off, we were there. So it took them an hour and a half to figure out how to get her out. So she was pinned for a total of 4.5 hours. And then it was like an additional 4 hours to get the path cleared enough so that they can
to get you extricated. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was quite the experience. We were like, we had all kinds of trauma symptoms that night, like throwing up and just like, all kinds of things. But just otherwise, just the time, even though it was, from 9 to let's say 5 in the morning, it really felt like less than that because just the state of mind that we were in. And I remember like when they finally brought Vic up on like one of those carrying sort of gurneys without wheels up the path we were all following, and they put her on a side-by-side, I guess. And then drove off, and I remember kind of feeling like, it's going to sound so entitled to say this, but I remember being like, where's our ride? Like, we're survivors here. Like, where's our ride? But no, we had to walk.
Yeah.
We had to walk for like 45 minutes. And I just remember thinking, like, I don't know why in my mind that it'd be more organized than that, but it's because there was no way in. And so just, I had a little taste of what it could be like to be sort of an evacuee of a bigger kind of
a situation,
disaster,
and of an
right?
event.
Where it's like there is no fancy car that's going to pick you up because you're a survivor and blankets for you. It's like you're just going to have to keep going. And luckily, I think that there was a firefighter that gave my son a piggyback ride because it was a long walk. And then it was like no rides. My partner is now at the hospital in Mattawa, and we're like, how do we get there? So we just kept asking police officer after police officer, and nobody had room for us. And finally, somebody was like, I have room. So we got driven over there, and I had to get checked. I was sort of marked as injured, and I did have some contusions to my back, my arm, and my ribs. And but I was cleared, and my partner, unfortunately, was just in a very bad way. It was a very big emergency situation where we had to get the arm open because it was so swollen with compartment syndrome. And then basically like the story is quite has many, many kind of corners and stuff. But at the end of the day, like Vic was hospitalized for a month. And it was in Sudbury for a week, North Bay for a week, and then Sudbury for 3. And there's been 4 surgeries. The last one was in May. So it's like this ongoing thing, this ongoing reminder. And we're just doing what we can to like not freak out. Like we were just talking about the storm. Was it Sunday night? That we just had here in North Bay in Mattawa, and like definitely felt the trauma symptoms in the body, in the stomach, exactly like it did that night. And just having to kind of do the self-talk, right? Like we're okay, we're in a structure, we're in a permanent structure, we're okay, we're safe. But yes, it feels like it's going to be that way for a while.
I had to do the same thing the other night. In fact, there's been 3 mini storms, but the severe lightning and thunderstorm of the other night. So I was pacing in the same cabin where the tree came through. I did not get on my hands and knees this time, and I had to do the same thing. I'm going to be okay. I know how to breathe, and that lasted about 2 hours of the intense lightning and thunder. It just wouldn't go away. Storm would come through, the next cell would come through, the next cell. So again, it brought back all those memories as well. And so I thought to myself, and that kind of leads me to, you had to go back to your trailer a couple of weeks or so. How did you feel then? Because that night, of course, it happened for me. It was 9:12 thereabouts. And then, of course, as you say, over till 5 o'clock in the morning, then it was obviously darkness and it was very humid and all those kinds of, but then you had to go back a number of weeks later to pick up your things to actually see the carnage.
Yeah, it was 5 weeks later. I remember just being like, I can't believe, like, that's how bad it is that for 5 weeks we couldn't go back, right? So our vehicles are there, our stuff is there. I think that you had mentioned earlier the guitar, and like that was the one item that I was the most concerned about because it was my daughter's. But yeah, going back was very haunting, very, very haunting. Like driving through all the trees and just being like, holy geez. Like, it's like, I think that what we couldn't get over for months was that we survived it. Like, and that everyone did. Like, we were convinced that night that we were the only survivors.
It's miraculous someone died.
It's
like, it's
200
unbelievable.
people. Like, I don't understand how that could be.
Yeah.
Like,
well, the legend goes, it is legend that the Nibissine sculpture that we had blessed just a couple days before was on the ground, and it saved all the people. And a lot of people think that the sculpture was angry, but no, I say Nibissine was saved all the people that night. But that's urban legend for that particular event. But I want to segue to, we had Dr. Margaret McKinnon from McMaster University, who's done a lot of work with PTSD. And I want to talk about how we can get prepared, mentally for events, any event in life that has trauma. But it's a new area of mental health. I mean, in our lifetimes, mental health was, when I was growing up, no one would talk about it, right? In fact, you'll get over it kind of thing. But in the last, we'll say, a decade, I mean, it's a mainstream topic. So thoughts as a registered therapist, how would you approach that getting ready before it could, because you and I have both gone camping again, and we were a little nervous because I think you said you went camping, and of course you've just come back on holiday. But nonetheless, the next time you went out, what did you have to think about?
Yeah, so first of all, like, we got so lucky. We just went camping this past weekend at River and Sky, and like the weather was fine. So like, I haven't had to face camping with hearing thunder in the background yet. But as far as being prepared, I think that we are kind of, maybe some of us are in denial about like how much things have changed with climate. And so like, back in the day when we heard severe storm warning, we might have been like, whatever. But I feel like now it's like we really have to take those warnings seriously because the storms are getting stronger and they're getting bigger, and because of our climate change. And so like that's one piece. But I think that the other thing is like the reality about life is that there's uncalculable, unpredictable events. And there's no way that we can have it all covered in our minds. Like there's just no way we can anticipate, right? And thank God our bodies, our nervous systems are wired to respond without preparation, right? Because it's almost like anticipating that would have happened that night would have been a nightmare. Like we would have been like, I don't think I'd survive it, or I think I'd lose my mind, or I'd have PTSD forever. And then you actually go through it and you're like, oh, I was calm. I handled it well. Like, look how resilient I was. Like, I think that we don't anticipate the reality of how we function through these events. But yeah, so there's a level of having to accept that life has unpredictable events. Like, there's just no way of knowing, right? But I think in general, I think we were mentioning before we started the show that a grab bag, right? My friend who lives in Jasper, lost her house to the forest fire a couple of years ago, and she's the one who brought up this concept of a fire box or a fire bin. And ever since, and now more than ever, like, we're starting to make one at my place. We're starting to slowly but surely, and it's not about like a bunch of food and stuff like that. It's more like important documents, first aid kit, flashlights, water, like the kind, things to filter water and that kind of stuff, right? So it's just a different way of thinking, so that we feel more prepared, and it's part of our healing journey as well to feel like, we'll feel more prepared in some way next time.
The snowmobile is parked. The ice is melted. And suddenly, all those batteries you ignored all winter are no longer working. The boat just won't start. The ATV's not cooperating. Even the golf carts decided it's taking the season off. That's where Battery North Bay comes in. Boats, ATVs, motorcycles, e-bikes, solar systems, cordless tools, even the kids' Power Wheels. If it runs on a battery, chances are we've got it in stock and ready to go. We're locally owned, proudly serving Northern Ontario, and we ship Canada-wide. Stop by 1315 Main Street West or call 705-478-5400. Battery North Bay, powered up for every season.
At Agnico Eagle, we are committed to being a trusted community partner, focusing our efforts on building a local economy that lasts for generations. Our careers offer the flexibility and ample downtime needed to find lifelong balance. We strive to be a good neighbor, investing in our people and their future, not just because we operate here, but because this is home. We make mining work.
This feeling of being prepared. I know I'm working on my go bag to make sure, and one of the things I've learned from the victims of 9/11 in the United States is you have to have more food in it because you never know. You might be on your own for a long, long time. But I feel that if I have to go, before I grab that bag, that I'm going to have that feeling that, okay, it's okay, I'm ready to go. And I think this, again, all this preparedness, because earlier in the conversation you said about you couldn't believe how calm you would be. Can we do things, though, to bring ourselves to that kind of state beforehand?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. And I would be curious to hear from the other survivors. Like, did anybody else lose it? And were they screaming and freaking out of stress? Or were they also calm?
Did you hear that during the night?
I heard somebody screaming that night. And we thought that person passed away as well because they were screaming for quite a while and then it stopped. And we kept reassuring her, like, from across the river, because she said she was stuck under a tree. And we kept saying, help is on the way, help is on the way. And she's she was like really, really kind of upset. And all of a sudden it stopped. So we're like, okay, so she died. You know, we had all these preconceived ideas of what happened that night, and to find out that nobody did, right? I don't know. I think that, like, you know, they say that the trauma responses, like the fight or flight systems, they respond before our conscious mind does, because if it was up to our conscious mind, we would be long dead. Like, we're so slow at processing. It's almost like, even like a weird metaphor is like those house flies. You know, we think that we're slapping them really hard, but it's like, to them, it's like a slow-mo, you know, our hand is going towards them, right? So, like, we definitely, we can't really prepare for this because it's our nervous system that will actually kick in. Well, and it will tell us, are we fighting? Are we flying? Are we freezing? What are we doing? How are we surviving this? It's not us going, what should I do?
I asked this to Margaret yesterday because she went through a traumatic experience, and she's also very well-educated and really at the top of her profession when it comes to understanding stuff. And this kind of applies to you as well because you are an educated psychotherapist. So do you have a different experience with trauma because of your knowledge? Or is it something that's weird because you're trying to rationalize it, but then you're also human and emotions aren't rational?
It's a really good question. I feel like in the time of like the actual passage, I don't think it had anything to do with my training. It was the after where my training came in handy, like the aftermath, like after we left the park, because I remember thinking, okay, I got to be really careful here that this doesn't turn into PTSD, because we all have normal trauma symptoms for the first few months after a traumatic event. They're very normal. Some people run to call it PTSD. It is not PTSD for months. PTSD is something that could develop if trauma symptoms don't sort of wane the way that they're supposed to naturally. And usually, like, the biggest culprits from like kind of the work that I do, it's like self-blaming or finding a way that's like, you should have done this differently, or it was your fault, you shouldn't have put the trailer there, or, you know. Any times that we start to put ourselves as responsible for what happened in a situation that we have no control over, that's usually the beginnings of PTSD, because it won't file. It's almost like the memory won't file properly. So I had to really fight against being so mad at myself that I parked next to those two trees, right? I put the trailer next to those two trees on purpose, because that's what I do when I camp. I go right next to the big trees. And in the end, I'm like, that was so dumb, because we learn very young that, like, in a severe thunderstorm, get away from trees. Like, so I had to really fight against that one, because I was pretty upset with myself for that and feeling like the whole thing was sort of my fault, right? And that's where I really, because if you don't know about PTSD and what can like kind of create the bigger problem of PTSD, you might think it's noble and a good thing to like berate yourself and be mad at yourself for the decisions that led up to that moment, right? But if you know how almost dangerous it is to do that, or how much like repercussions there could be, then you just stay very focused on, you know, figuring out a way to not make it your fault in the story in the way that you're telling it to yourself, right?
Yeah, just by chance, have you had to work with a client that was in that storm or something like that?
No.
Would you let yourself work with a client?
I would. And I mean, I think it's the same thing as I primarily support people who have lost somebody, right? So, and I've lost somebody. So it's not like it's like every time I hear it, it triggers me. It's more like, oh, I have this life experience, this lived experience that can help you because I get it, you know? So I definitely would. If there was any survivors out there looking for some support, I would be open to that. It wouldn't be too close to home for me. It'd be more like, yep, I get it, you know?
Yeah, well, in my many stories, you know, I interview them things, and I come to a point in time during the interview that I think to myself, oh, they could use therapy. They need to talk to someone. And occasionally I'll say, have you talked to somebody about it? And when they say no, I don't comment on that. That's not my place. But I often think there's a lot of people out there who, whatever the event might be, need this kind of help.
Yes. The other two big things that like where it's like, you know, therapy could help if, you know, or just even this knowledge is knowing that what happens when we go through a trauma is that our brain sort of makes this overgeneralized rule. So like in this example, it could be like, never camp again. Right? It's overgeneralized and it keeps all semblance of any type of similar trauma from happening again. And then because of that overgeneralized rule, we now avoid the thing, right? We just avoid. And that is, again, another PTSD maker, right? Like another thing that will make the trauma really, really stick around. We might not notice it because we're not camping, so we're not feeling the distress. But like the more that we avoid it, it's almost like that fear is just growing and growing and growing and growing. And it's only through the exposure and going back to it that you can sort of take your power back.
Yeah, Nora, and I've met people who have said, I'm never going camping again. And again, I don't know what to say to them. That's just like a kind of the finality of their situation.
And it makes sense, right? It's like, it's almost like, I think that the example sometimes I give to clients is like, if you were at the bank and there was a full-on bank robbery, like a very aggressive bank robbery, you're not going to want to go back into a bank for a while. Because your brain is telling you banks are not safe. And it takes a while, and sometimes through therapy, to be like, oh, like most of the time banks are safe. It's just very, very rarely. Like that's the big theme for me. It's like, it's so rare because it was so rare that my daughter just died for no apparent reason with her heart just stopping. And it's so rare that I'm camping. And in the one little spot that I'm camping, there's a downburst, right? So it takes a little while to kind of like let your brain really realize that it's like the probability and is so small, because the trauma symptoms want to make you think that it's all risk. It's all like, bad. And it's only bad things can come from camping kind of thing.
Well, with the changing climate, whether it's floods or hurricanes, tornadoes, power outages due to cold winter, ice storms, whatever, is it on a general sense, do we have to admit to ourselves now that this could happen and to be ready? And that's a margin or an indicator that at least mentally we're thinking about that this could happen, as opposed to, oh, it's never going to happen to me. I mean, I just experienced 5 days when the power was out with all those students, and their reaction was, we can't have a shower. And going into the lake and river, they couldn't equate that getting clean in the river or the lake is just the same as a shower. The water coming out of the shower is what we need, and we can't have it. And they grew very disgruntled. I thought it was very, very interesting to watch that.
Yeah.
Sorry, they thought that they couldn't go into the lake and...
No, they could. We got them in there, but
okay.
They didn't equate. They weren't clean.
Oh,
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think car accidents are another good metaphor, right? It's like we all know that, there's risk. We might not be aware of it all the time,
It's a huge
but
risk.
Yeah, it's it's a risk. You get into a car, it's a risk. And so it's almost like accepting that, there's a chance that this can go wrong, and therefore I have to stay very focused and assume that it's not just about your driving. There could be other bad drivers, right? And just take the risk. Because I think that was sort of at first our plan I think it was like a month later, we're like, okay, our plan will be when we camp again, if there's a severe storm warning, we'll just check out for a bit and we'll come back later. And then there's been 2 experiences since then where an unpredicted storm happens, right? We were hiking just a month after or maybe a month and a half after the event, and it said rain starts at 5, and it was 3 p.m. Nothing about a thunderstorm, and about 45 minutes into our hike, we started hearing really loud thunder. And so it's like, okay, so there goes that plan. So I remember kind of feeling this moment of like, so the goal is then to come to a place where it's like, I accept that there's a small chance that I can get injured if I do this.
Has your preparedness, well, we talked about preparedness, but when you think about the situation you were in, right, you're pinned by trees and there's everything, do you change, do you bring anything in case that happens again? Do you bring I'm going to ask this to both of you, because I'm curious if you bring a hatchet or any, a chainsaw or anything with you that would help mitigate that. And then I'm going to ask Bill what you should bring as somebody who's an outdoorsman.
That's so interesting. It's a good question. I don't have a chainsaw. Maybe I can get one. But no, I think that what was interesting about that night is I felt like a little scavenger. I kept going from car to car and tent and all of our little area, which was very hard to do, to navigate because of all the trees down. And I'd be like, oh, I found this. Oh, I found that. It was almost like being resourceful. It's like, we can use this for that. And because Vic was getting poured rain on, right? And so we found a tarp, a tent tarp, and we wrapped her up in it. Just things like that, right? Where it's like, okay, we don't have water. Let's go look around for that, And so even if we didn't have the things with us, we were able to find a lot of the things. A chainsaw, I don't know. I don't even know how to operate it, and I would be too scared to even, attempt that. I think it's that I do have trust in the system that there will be help, Here in this area anyways. I've been hearing stories about other places in Canada where with evacuations and stuff, there is nobody. There's no help, right? And people are having to do it themselves. So luckily, I think that I do have a bit of trust. I had trust that they would get there eventually, right? I don't know that I would bring a chainsaw with me. We do have a hatchet, though. We have a great first aid kit. We really leveled up our stuff, and to just kind of keep everything close together. I think that's the other thinking that we have to start having, right? Is that when a disaster like that happens, everything's now all over the place. So to kind of have everything centralized at a very grabbable spot would be the kind of the
absolutely.
The idea.
As I'm doing my research on this, another comment I received from someone who lives in Nicaragua in a rural section, and they were saying the people of the area, when there's during hurricane season, they know that no one's coming to help them. So I thought to myself that if I heard that statement, I thought, so they already know that, so they're as prepared as they can. The hurricane's going to come because they live in a hurricane-prone area, and no one's coming to help, so they're going to help themselves. Whatever that means. But I thought it was an important realization. But to answer the question, the best thing in your toolkit or toolbox is your brain. And of course, you just said that. You used a piece of fabrine, the tarp, to wrap Vic up. You do whatever it needs to be done. But I urge people to go onto the Can Emerge website and many others, the Red Cross, about what should be in your go bag. And we've kind of hit all the things: food, the water purification tablets, the documentation, the things you need for your prescriptions, but food for a number of days, not just 1 day, 2 day, but let's say a week. Extra clothes, extra socks, extra layers. It is not a bag; it's a duffel bag. It's going to be, if you're really thinking, you'd throw in. Often when I ask people, what's the most important thing in your first aid kit? And I have my day pack or my backpack. What's the most important thing in there? Of course, they'll say water. They'll say the first aid kit. But and I could throw the question back to you, but I'll answer the question. What is the most important thing I have in there? And then I try to give some of them clues with regards to body functions and the situation. Well, it's another sleeping bag, because when people go into shock, that's what you need to have. You need to have that sleep. First of all, it contains them, and there's a feeling of being calm and things. But so that sleeping bag will serve a lot of purposes. So this go-to bag, or box or duffel bag. We all need to have it. But if we asked all of us in this room, either we're working on it, but if you asked 100 people, there might be 1 or 2 people that would have that and have it ready at the door or in a very convenient spot, or when we go camping in the trailer or in your car. And we just don't do that. And I think this realization that this could happen that night and any other night, when it does, you say, yes. And so, again, these are events that we remember the rest of our lives. And then hopefully there's that proactive thing where we actually do something about it.
Yes, I think that also, I don't even know how I would have carried around a big duffel bag or a bin that night, for example. Like, that's the other thing is, like, in this case, it was trees down everywhere. And so I'm even just as we're talking thinking, like, a backpack at the very least, it would be better than a box or a bin or a duffel bag. Because if you're having to, crawl over and climb over things, it's not like you can't have something in your hands, right?
That night in particular, the one realization I took away too after interviewing many, many people, the people that got into their vehicles made that conscious decision, because we know the trailers are structurally not sound, no matter what kind of trailer, but the people that went into their cars were better off. Some of them did get trapped in their cars, but none of the structural integrity. So people were thinking about what they should do when harm's way is about to happen. But again, on that particular night, I know as well, it happened so quickly.
Yeah, I feel like there was not even a moment where I was like, maybe we should go in the car. It was so fast, And from what I heard, some people had a tree fall on the car. So it's like, how do we know? That's the thing. It's like there was no way of knowing which way the trees would have fallen. Because back when I was beating myself up for putting the trailer next to the 2 red trees, the red pines, they could have easily blown the opposite direction, and then the trailer would have been there, right? So, or it could have been the car. So it's just I feel like we all ended up where we were supposed to end up, and the fact that we were all safe except for one of us, that's shocking. I don't know, because I even picture a car, if something would have crushed it down, then we would have been stuck. I don't know. There's just so many ways it could have gone wrong. And that was what I went through for quite a while, was all the different ways it could have gone. I don't know if you had that experience too, but it was oh my God, what if when they were going to get the tent out of the fire, the tree would have fallen then? What if this, or what if that, or what if one of them would have died? What if all of them would have died? What if they wouldn't have come? Just the what ifs go nuts. And it's just at some point you have to stop with the what ifs, because that is... It is part of the process, but it could also kind of make you mad a little bit, right? It can make you kind of just get really stuck there, because that's not what happened. What happened is what happened. You have to kind of come back to the truth of the reality of what happened, instead of but what if this would have happened? What if that would have happened? Yeah.
Now, you just come off a grief retreat in May, and you're going to have another one and another one perhaps. And we know that mental health is more front and center in society over the last decade, X number of years. Where are we? Where do we have to go with mental health? What more awareness do we have to do? I mean, I often think about this preparedness we've got to get it into the schools. We've got to get into the curriculum, or mental health in general. The more we... Not just because of climate change and things like that, but just that whole of embracing mental health. Are we on the right track? I guess it's a general question.
It is a general question. Yeah, I think that for sure. I think there seems to be more and more movement towards mental health and understanding about it, and organizations are understanding it more, HR systems are understanding it more, but there's still a lot of systemic, what's it called? There's just a lot of us that don't understand it still, or that we downplay it, or we're embarrassed about it. We have shame about it. And sometimes even from a gendered lens, we talk about that a lot in my field, where boys are socialized to, only present as strong and not to express anything other than anger. So when it comes to that, I think that sometimes men are more kind of in a pickle because they're taught not to express their feelings. And from what I've learned from everything that I've gone through, is letting it through, expressing the emotions is how we heal. Letting yourself fall apart and unravel and cry and all the things is the way through. And we think sometimes no, we shove it down, we just keep swimming, we just keep going forward. But that will only last so long, because more and more events will keep piling on in your life. And then if you don't get into the practice of releasing it and letting and feeling it, it will eventually hit a breaking point where you will not be well for a while, kind of thing. You know, it's like there's only so much pressure and internalizing we could take before we kind of hit a breaking point.
Yeah, no, I've interviewed the author of one of the books, I've forgotten the correct title, but about tears. He had not cried for 10 years and wondered about that. And I know with my personal health scare that I had a few years ago and about how much it was important to cry. And cry I did, and more until you get to the point, again, you have working again with my therapist at that time till I finally realized that again, I almost lost my life, but now I've got to move on. So I've got to make that transition. I've got to acknowledge that. But I think that's so important. You just mentioned the crying, so I thought, oh yeah, that's
yes. And like what you're also speaking to is acceptance, right? Like we can't just get right to acceptance, and we do have to do the crying and the what ifs and all the kind of bargaining and all the stuff. But the goal is to get to a point of acceptance, and acceptance isn't like, yep, I'm totally cool with the fact that the storm happened, or I'm totally cool with the fact that my daughter died. It's more, this is what happened. I was camping and a really rare event happened that was really, really scary and it almost took our lives. That's what happened. But we survived, you know? And, you know, with my daughter, it's like, my daughter passed away. That's what happened, you know? Instead of like trying to like go round and round and round with like, maybe I should have done this, maybe I should have done that. Like that's just, the goal is to get to the place where you accept the reality of what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Not with happiness necessarily by any means, but just with realness. It's just like, this is the reality.
This has been a real conversation here at the Backroads Bill Podcast, and thank you so much, Namaste, for coming into the studio.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So big thank you to Brigitte for coming onto the podcast and telling her story, which is the second time that she's come on the network. Of course, as we mentioned, she was on to North Bay with Love before. Highly recommend checking out her story that she told Lisa. That was back at the beginning of the year. Very open and very interesting. Highly recommend you give that a listen. We'll put a link in the description as well. And again, this story, another very personal but a very scary situation that many people, not just Bridget and her family, not just that she faced, but a lot of people faced. And it brings forward, not just in this episode, but also the last episode, the importance of getting help. So if you enjoyed this episode, you can find more episodes of the Backroads Bill Podcast on your favorite podcast platforms. We have the audio version available on Spotify and Apple. The video version is available on the North Bay Echo YouTube channel, and you can find everything on our website, northbayecho.ca, where not just this podcast lives, but a bunch of other local North Bay and area podcasts. And that just about wraps things up for me and Bill. So we'll see you again next week for yet another Backroads Bill.